Did you know you can buy silver at spot price? Get your 10-ounce bar of silver at spot price today. Go to sdbullion.com/RP. Not only will you be buying silver without any premium, you'll also be supporting the independent media. Reluctant Preppers gets a small commission when you take advantage of this special offer, going to sdbullion.com/RP. That's sdbullion.com/RP.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We're delighted to have a returning guest tonight, Joel Salatin, co-founder of Polyface Farms, a renowned lecturer, author, and teacher on self-sufficiency, sustainable farming, permaculture, and networking in local communities for robust systems to provide food at the local level. He is here with us once again on Reluctant Preppers. Joel, thanks for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you, Donegan. It's great to be with you.
I wondered, before we go on tonight, if you could weigh in on a major event that happened in the world of big business just this last month here with Amazon and Whole Foods, and how that could change the global food landscape. What are you seeing, and what do you think that foretells for the direction that our food landscape is going to be going?
Yeah, well, obviously it's pretty early in the game, but for sure, Amazon, I think it could go two ways. It can either go to hyper-centralization, or it could move us to a place of greater what we call in direct marketing a segregated clientele. Obviously there are people wanting to sell nationally and all that, but there are also a lot of people like us who want to sell regionally, but have a real hard time with software, with the the technological part of the electronic interface. And this is all part of moving us away from bricks and mortar. You can say, well, Whole Foods, that's going toward bricks and mortar, but I think that Amazon, I don't think they have a huge desire to go to bricks and mortar. I think they're looking to take things farther into the electronic shipping, at your doorstep kind of thing, and of course develop apps for real time. Where you place your order, you just basically drive through supermarkets. You got drive through fast food now. Next thing will be drive through. Where you order your groceries and you just drive by a drive-in window and they pop in your car. That's the sort of interface that Amazon is bringing, and so it'll be real interesting to see if this space allows for segregated markets, so people who want to be localized can offer through the power of this interface to a select field of zip codes their products. And I can tell you, our farm, we don't want to ship to Denver, Colorado, but we would love to be able to access through the power of Amazon, the person 50 miles away in the city, and so if my appeal to Amazon is okay, I get it, I get the the electronic, essentially cyberspace inventorying and the electronic interface. Well, can we facilitate that? Can we use that then to facilitate, better quality vetted stuff? And, we'll see. I mean, the thing is, Amazon brings to the table an incredible, marketing power, and if that can be leveraged for, and some people will say, well, Salatin, you're just out here in la la land thinking. Of course, it's going to be more centralized. It's going to throw out the little guy and make it easier for the big guy. Well, that may be true, although we certainly see some indications that the segregated marketing technology will be part and parcel of this global technology. It wouldn't surprise me to see, the one reaction creates an equal and opposite reaction, and it wouldn't surprise me to see actually both of them enabled, which is fine. So, time will tell.
Yeah, if you look at these large distribution models and supply chains and so on, one of the problems that they're working very hard to solve is this idea of regional distribution and local delivery and that sort of thing, trying to drive out inefficiencies. And centralization is one strategy that's been used in that. But when you come to perishable products and things that where the source is not centralized, but the source is actually distributed, and then the recipient, the market is also distributed, there is the opportunity there for those who would seize it to somehow provide an intelligent matching of those local suppliers to local consumers. And ironically, people being able to find you yourself as Polyface Farms, for example, people being able to find you who wouldn't otherwise have known about you, and that could be replicated all over the country. People finally being able to find the local or nearby producers that they weren't even aware of before.
Yeah, there are actually numerous small kind of independent little outfits now that are trying to create these electronic interfaces for the local food system. And the problem is they generally don't get any traction because, well, there's 3 billion websites or something. Yeah, you get, the beauty of the internet is that it's the ultimate democratized interface because my website can look just as snazzy and cool as Walmart's website, right? So on the internet you can't tell the difference whether it's a multi-billion-dollar company or a little mom and pop that's doing $100,000. So that's a cool thing, and it's that egalitarian and an interface. The problem is that it's crowded, and so this is why internet companies spend $3 million for a 30-second Super Bowl ad to say here we are. That's the whole that's the downside of a completely kind of egalitarian platform. It is so egalitarian everybody can do it, and everybody does do it, and so sticking out from the crowd, it gets very, very difficult.
Right. There's a difference between that concentration of production, which can be so destructive, versus concentration of mind share, which doesn't have to be destructive if it's used in the right way. But I can understand people's concern and healthy skepticism around that. People have been concerned about Whole Foods from various aspects for some time. There's been concerns about how they didn't support local union truck drivers and things like that. There's been concerns about other questions. Now, you mentioned earlier on, just in passing, about how this could be this kind of branding and criteria or selection could potentially improve predictability or food integrity if you don't know who you're getting stuff from, but you know that, well, at least it's been screened or it's had to qualify for something. So if we could turn our attention to food integrity and self-sufficiency as related to that, you mentioned in our pre-discussion a couple of news stories or things that you became aware of recently that do have to do with food integrity. Can you tell us about those? Sure.
Well, I think that it's very much related to this whole discussion because as you move a marketing interface, I don't think this is a word, but you know what it means. As you ubiquitize the marketing, the interface, then differentiation becomes a real problem, And so it can actually drive people to, to do a little more sleuthing. And so one of the things that has been fascinating is a new report that's just come out from Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture in New York. And they did a very comprehensive, it's a 50-page report on the grass-finished beef business in the U.S. And it's quite interesting because it puts the grass-fed beef industry at $4 billion, and the whole beef industry is $78.2 billion. So $4 billion is it's still extremely small. But $3 billion of that $4 billion is cheap imported grass-fed beef, and the report says that the single biggest hurdle in the whole movement is cheap imported grass-fed beef coming in from the number one country is Australia. And see, this is one of the soft underbellies of Chipotle. Chipotle, which is touted integrity food. They will not give the names of their vendors, and one of the reasons is because I don't know how much, but I've heard everything. I don't know how much, but anyway, substantial is coming from Australia, and they don't want they just seem people not know that it's coming from Australia. Australia, 31% of grass-fed beef sold in the U.S. is from Australia. And then New Zealand, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. And what's critical to understand is that in order to be imported, the beef has to go through a USDA inspected plant, and any import that goes through a USDA inspected plant is stamped product of the USA, even though the plant is on foreign soil. And so when we talk about this integrity thing, product of USA it is going on all this foreign product, and so we back up to know your food, know your farmer, and you realize that the system as we know it is pretty stacked against small farms, direct market farms, that sort of thing. It did have some real interesting stuff in it. One of the things that it had, a lot of people say, well, this grass-fed beef, it's inefficient and it'll take too much land and all that stuff. And it said that if all we did was increase productivity 33% on America's pasture land, 33% increase, which, farms like ours, we've increased it 400%. So 33%, I laugh at that figure. That's like easy. But 33% increase, that would be plenty of grass to finish all the beef in the U.S. without a single bit of additional land and 0 feedlots. That's a kind of cool figure. It also this was new to me. I had never, you learn stuff every day. I had never heard the term methanatrophic bacteria. I think it's methanatrophic, maybe it's methanatrophic, but it's METHAN, but no E on it, so it goes right to methanatrophic bacteria. I'd never heard of these bacteria in soil. Of course, there's billions of different kinds of bacteria in the soil. Anyway, these methanatrophic bacteria can oxidize some 65 head of cows, the methane that they create through digestion, farts, and burps. They can oxidize about the equivalent of 65 head per acre per year on well-managed pasture soils. Of course, this bacteria is not found in feedlots, and so this is another example of where pastures, grass finished, solves problems, it doesn't create problems. It solves problems. And yet, the scientific community is studying a completely dysfunctional grain-fed feedlot system and determining that cows are bad when, there are wonderful positives if you change it to a functional system that actually works. So it was just interesting to me, as a grass-finished beef producer, that the biggest hurdle in the industry, in the small U.S. industry trying to get a toehold here, market share, are these foreign imports. And in fact, when they interviewed producers, producers, their top challenges, they said their biggest hurdles were, access to processing, market demand. There's not enough market, access to distribution in markets, getting full price for everything, including the chuck roast that nobody knows how to cook, and access to land. Those were the big ones. And it's just kind of consistent that, when you're down in the trenches, you don't actually see the big picture. So the report's been interesting to give us a kind of a bigger bird's eye view of what's actually going on.
You also mentioned fake burgers in our earlier talk. Was that different from the grass-fed beef made in USA?
Well, a new term that this grass-fed beef report introduced me to is what are now called grass feedlots, where they're growing these animals in feedlots, but they're just feeding them pelletized forages and calling them grass-fed, which is, of course, a mockery of the grass-fed pasture idea. But there's always a charlatan. Then now there's an outfit. The Silicon Valley is pumping a lot of money into a fake meat burger company called Impossible Foods. I ran into these guys actually out in San Francisco at a conference. We were both speaking at the same conference, outfit called Impossible Foods. Well, Silicon Valley is just nuts over these guys, and what they're making is a genetically engineered ingredient called soy. Now, I might not say this right. It's SLH is it's the acronym SLH. It's called soy leghemoglobin, like hemoglobin, but leghemoglobin. It's LEGHEM, leghemoglobin. I have no idea if I'm saying that right. But what's interesting is Impossible Foods has put this stuff on the market. They've sold a slew of it, and their position is that this is GRAS status. That's called
generally regarded as safe. Yeah.
Generally regarded as safe. Yeah. And the FDA is looks like is shutting them down and claiming that this is not, of course, the whole generally regarded as safe, the whole GRAS designation was for typical foods like salt and sugar and pepper and tomatoes and milk and just foods that we've had around forever and ever and ever. You don't have to run a toxicity test or some sort of a safety test on an egg. And eggs they've been around for a long time. And so when the Impossible Foods people put this genetically engineered soy product in as generally regarded as safe, they kind of overstepped the bounds here, and it's pretty interesting. Report says the case of Impossible Burger raises concerns that surpass this one patty, implicates the extreme genetic engineering field of synthetic biology, particularly the new high-tech investor trend of, and here's so you were asking me, what's new? Well, here's a new word. Ready for a new word? So we've gotten a couple new words. I hope the one was methanatrophic bacteria. Another one is grass feedlots.
Right.
So here's a new one. The high-tech investors are looking for this is a trend now that they're investing in of Vatitterian, V-A-T-I-T. In other words, it's foods, it's meat, dairy, and other animal proteins grown in biotech vats instead of from an animal. So now we have an entirely new business sector in the food sector called a Vatitterian. There was vegetarian and vegan, and now there's a Vatitterian. I eat stuff out of a vat, and the Impossible Burger is the poster child for this vat-grown approach. But there are other companies that are mimicking this. Perfect Day has made a vat cow milk. Clara Foods has made a vat egg white, and so this stuff is coming on as a clean tech fix to climate change and animal cruelty and all that stuff. So it's a pretty interesting thing. Of course, the fact is that the soybeans to grow this stuff, they kill a lot more microbes, insects, snakes, field mice, rabbits, birds, fish, and other native wildlife than a cow ever did, which, when a cow in a pasture actually increases all of those things. But monocrops like soybeans destroy them. So, it's a false sense of animal welfare that drives people to this. But anyway, Vatitterian. That's your new word for the day, Donegan. Vatitterian.
Good gracious! And besides, I noticed both the Impossible Foods soy leghemoglobin and now the Vatitterian soybean-based milk. These we've had Dr. Jay Nielsen, MD, on our show talking about. He said the Romans had their lead cup, and our lead cup is GMO and soy. Here you've got the two together, GMO and soy together. Soy, some people say, is no good for anyone, especially men, but for women either, as far as being estrogenic and increasing susceptibility to different types of hormone-related illnesses and male menopause and all kinds of things like that. But don't worry, you can take some drugs for that at the tune of $300 a month for men to reclaim some of the effects that you lose when you imbibe too much in soy. It certainly sounds like. The other thing you made me think of was people have talked for some time about transhumanism, where people's artificial intelligence taking the next step to where people are going to try to have their own intelligence uploaded to a computer, that sort of thing. We've had movies from Hollywood about that, Transcendence and others. But here, if you can, and in vitro fertilization, that sort of thing, you taking life itself out of the hands of nature, out of natural processes, out of the hands of God designed, but instead putting them into the hands of science and technology. It sounds like just a Frankenstein future where not only our foods can be grown in the lab and our intelligence and one more way that we're being obsoleted through technology.
Yeah, Sure. Well, one of the big ones that's occurring. This is fairly common knowledge, although maybe not as it's certainly common in my circles, but it's not commonly known out in the bigger world. And that is that pretty much in the developed world, and I'm not using that. I'm not saying that as a condescension toward Africa or Uzbekistan or anything. I'm just using it because it's a term that people understand. In the developed world, in the last 30 years, sperm counts in men have dropped just shy of 60%. I think it's 59.3%, 60%. And in the undeveloped countries, there has been zero sperm drop. And that should raise the eyebrows of anyone who's thinking about anything about the future. We talk about climate change and global warming. Well, what about sterility? And so there's got to be a very, very specific reason why this is unique to the developed countries, to the technologically advanced countries, and it's not occurring at all in the non-technologically advanced countries.
In addition to, you mentioned the male aspects, also runaway breast cancer and other ailments that women are being affected by, and people racing around for the cure as though something is suddenly popped up that's a communicable disease or something, and it's like, wait a minute, why don't we just stop and ask what changed here? Because if it's not mostly genetic and it's not mostly communicable, then it's something environmental that's changed and lifestyle that's changed. What has changed as far as the artificial chemicals, both in our outer exposure, our homes, our businesses, but also the food that we eat and how it's affecting our bodies. What were we designed to work with, and what are we putting in there? It's also ironic, isn't it, that at the supermarket they got the organic section over there, and then they have the conventional produce. How conventional is it when we're just being lab rats for experimentation of things that have never been proven safe?
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I mean, a lot of stuff that's in the grocery store, takes a laboratory to make, and of course didn't even exist before 1900. That's kind of Michael Pollan's, if you remember his Omnivore's Dilemma. That was kind of his cutoff date, for what was acceptable. If it was available before 1900, we were okay. And of course, the big joke there is that hot dogs were invented at the 1890 Chicago World's Fair. So hot dogs came in right under the wire. Just 10 years in advance of the 1900 benchmark. But yeah, you're right. But I am convinced that the average person does still have this subconscious notion or a paradigm that all this stuff, including breast cancer or whatever, is essentially catchable. In other words, you catch it. There's not some specific immunological function that you can either stimulate or discourage. That now you and I know that breast cancer isn't. I will take that one as an example. Is not communicable even any more than prostate cancer or whatever. It's not, we know it's not communicable, and yet, don't you think the average person, deep down in their subconscious, they believe that this stuff, you just catch it, it. Uncle Tom caught cancer. I mean, we have that mentality, like you catch a cold or you catch the flu or whatever. But even those, the notion that you can actually have extremely good immunological function is just not part of our culture anymore. Grandma used to say every kid needs to eat a pound of dirt before they're 12. And I certainly, ate my share. I still do some. But as we have moved to a sterile pharmaceutical existence, we have a compromised immune system that never gets exercised because we're not out planting seeds, digging in the soil, getting calluses, splinters, and dirt under our fingernails. All of that stuff is an immunological exercise. And, when all you do is grow up, in an urban setting with your thumbs on a laptop computer or a Game Boy smartphone, you're extremely immunocompromised. This is the whole hygiene hypothesis that many doctors that specialize in allergies are signing on to, saying that when you're not exercising your immune system, and then you suddenly encounter some bacteria or some pollen or whatever, then suddenly your body, your immune system goes into hyperdrive because this is some new thing, and it overrides your normal functions, and then suddenly you're in asthma. You have all sorts of problems.
Yeah, if people want to look into that further, there's an article by Dr. Jordan Rubin from Garden of Life Foods, and it starts out with, would you go eat some dirt? And actually says he's not totally kidding, because homeostatic soil organisms, or HSOs, are one of the most rich forms of probiotics and prebiotics and that sort of thing that people have grown up healthy with. I also, my viewers are well aware of my encounter with Lyme disease, but one thing that I haven't shared with them is a previous part of the first 2/3 of my life dealing with Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease, and the research that has come out demonstrating the demographic correlations between urban populations, the growth of urbanism in the U.S., for example, and the growth of inflammatory bowel disease, that people who were living out on the land close to livestock and that sort of thing had protective factors that those living in the middle of big cities in quote-unquote more sanitary conditions lost those protective factors. And now some of the most groundbreaking treatment with very low cost and no side effects coming out of the University of Iowa and Dr. Joel Weinstock and others is reintroduction of porcine whipworm ova, or Trichuris suis ova, TSO, that people can take, and it's available without a prescription. It has no side effects because the stuff, they naturally die off after 2 weeks of trying to colonize inside the human, but after 2 weeks they've moderated the immune system in a healthful way that can suppress the overactive autoimmune responses and inflammatory processes to really reduce inflammation not only in the gut but in a host of other areas. So there's a lot behind what you're saying, and we've lost more than people realize by absenting ourselves from the source of our food and from our life. So
sure, I'm thinking of how many times, for example, I've pulled a carrot from the garden. I just wipe it off on my pants and just eat it. There's a few drops of soil on it, but I've done that all my life. Strawberries, just pick it off the vine. Asparagus. Just grab it. Certainly, there's a little bit of soil, or there's something up on there, and just snap it off and eat it. I mean, I've done that all the time, and that has to be healthier than dousing it all in chlorine, and making sure that every single microbe and bacteria. People don't realize that 95% of all bacteria and microbes, 95% of them are actually good. Only 5% are bad. And so our whole goal here is not to sterilize, but to simply make a habitat that allows the good ones to beat the bad ones, which is the default position of nature. It's the way nature wants to go. You have to really work hard at sterilizing everything. I mean, that takes a lot of work. Just like a vacuum is hard. Our planet doesn't like a vacuum. It doesn't like sterile either.
And it inherently throws things out of balance. The scorched earth policy that's caused by overuse of antibiotics, for example, and my wife and I being treated for Lyme have experienced that, is just wreaks havoc on your body's natural balance and your healthy immune system. People who have had weeds overgrow in their yard when they mow their lawn too short and their grass gets too stressed have seen what happens when the undesirables can take over when you don't have when you have a weakened population of the good guys. And yet we live in a neighborhood where we've seen about 25 new homes built on 30 lots in the past 3 years, and it's not at all uncommon to see people spraying Roundup, Agent Orange, to completely scorched earth, kill everything on their yard, and then waiting for that to die to fade. They feel, and then go ahead and planting with grass on top of that, in the desire to eradicate anything that could possibly, any plant life, before they come back and put the desired grass on top of it. But what the health effects are of repeated exposure to that at low levels or compounded in our environment, as opposed to, as you say, having enough, nurturing what is already intrinsically the good guys, the healthy side of the balance, and coming at it from that standpoint.
Sure. That makes such a huge difference. We raise chickens here, and a lot of people raise chickens. It's one of the most ubiquitous, self-sufficiency things you can do. Chickens are such great scavengers. They eat your kitchen scraps. They can scavenge for themselves, and they lay these, eggs, which don't require refrigeration for a good while if you just keep them a little bit cool, and they're just an extremely resilient, easy, certainly small scale, lot friendly kind of thing, animal, and when we start our chicks, in the industry, what they do is they fumigate and sanitize and antimicrobial and everything else, to sterilize these brooder areas. And what and of course, we're starting thousands. We're not a backyard operation, but we never do that. And what we do is actually let the bedding build up real deep, like 2 feet deep, and actually have it as a compost pile. Actually, stimulate the composting of it, and it actually grows bugs, and the chicks then are stimulated to go in there and scratch and eat and find all those, and they actually dig down. Even a little chick, even just a week old, will dig down, 8 inches. You see them just tearing up. Well, not only is that exercise, but for them, which is good, but it's also providing all this, tremendous habitat of bacteria. And so one of the most critical things that people with a backyard flock can do is to if you have for example, if you have a yard that's too small to put them on pasture, which is of course very, very common, and you have to have them in some sort of a hutch or a coop, is to make sure that coop is built so it can handle at least 12 to 24 inches of essentially composting bedding, and you don't want to just have newspapers and clean them out, or a mesh floor and clean it out. You want them to actually be on compost, because nature sanitizes 2 ways. One is with rest and sunshine, which is of course the movement, the pasture movement model, moving them every day. The other is with vibrant decomposition, which is of course happens in a compost pile. And so in order to get that vibrant decomposition, you have to have the carbon, the nitrogen, the microbes, the soil, and the oxygen. The water and the nitrogen, all in proper balance. And when you have all that, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen. I'll get this right. Slow down. Carbon, nitrogen, microbes, water, moisture, and oxygen. Those are the 5 essential ingredients of a compost pile. And when those have enough mass, enough thickness, then you get decomposition. Well, you can't get decomposition at 2 inches or 3 inches or 4 inches. And so this is why we have to design our little chicken huts, chicken coops, so that they can handle this deep bottom bedding pack that can then create this compost, which is a habitat that allows the good bugs to beat the bad bugs. So in our brooder, where we're brooding tens of thousands of chicks through there a year, we never actually completely clean it out. Even when we clean it out for the year, we still leave several wheelbarrow fulls of material in there as an inoculant to inoculate the first group next year, so that the microbes are there. And you can actually measure the mortality of the chicks, the quality of the chicks. The deeper the bedding gets, the more healthy they are, because it's functioning better and better as it gets deep. So that's just another example of where I'm not saying don't wash your hands. I'm not saying don't brush your teeth. But I am saying that this hyper antimicrobial view. Well, look at soap. antimicrobial soap. I mean, wasn't that a fad, 8 years ago? Everybody, we got to use antimicrobial soap. The schools, everybody's on. Now, not only is it frowned upon, you can't even find it.
Yeah.
That doesn't even exist.
Finally had to admit that triclosan was bad for you.
Yeah. So I mean, you talk about a quick fad. That rose and fell in, I don't know what, less than 10 years. That's just an amazing story. It took hydrogenated vegetable oil about 60 years to rise and fall.
Yes.
But antimicrobial soap rose and fell real fast. And so just realize that we literally live in a bacterial soup. I liken it to if we could take an electron microscope and look at ourselves, we would look like the Peanuts cartoon character Pigpen. That's always got that swirl of stuff
cloud
around him.
Yeah.
That's we've got it from our hair, our breath, our exfoliating from our skin. I mean, we're literally walking. When I come up to you and shake your hand, I mean, there's so sometimes it'd make a good cartoon, wouldn't it? I mean, just this whole soup. It's literally a soup of microbes, and that's what we live in.
Well, Joel, our time is up for this visit, but I had challenged you at the beginning of this talk to see if you could tell us 3 things you learned this year about food integrity and self-sufficiency, and you have given us a lot more than that. It always proves that whenever we get you rolling, you're a wealth of information, and we'd love to have you back again to kind of restore our sanity, get our feet back on the ground and our heads back on straight. Just so glad you're here in our corner on Reluctant Preppers, and our viewers just love to take in your wit and wisdom. If they want to find more of your work and find out how they can take in some of your other talks and things you've got online, where can they find you?
Just go to our website, Polyface Farms, Polyface, polyfacefarms.com, and there's a whole wealth of material there, and you can see where I'm speaking, and you can see the books and YouTube links and news links and Facebook and all that sort of thing. It's I don't do it all, but it's all it's all there. We have a good team.
And you've got a great internship program with opportunities for young people, too. We've been speaking with Joel Salatin, who is co-founder of Polyface Farms and a real advocate for whole foods and local production permaculture. Joel, thank you for joining us once again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you, Donegan.